As the prophet of esports, I rely on trustworthy and meaningful data every day. Data from our research partner, YouGov, offers the most complete view of esports fans and gamers in the world, providing context to who they are, what they think, the brands they buy, and things they do. YouGov's connected insights and research services inform strategy at every level. If you're a team, a brand, agency, or rights holder, you should be talking with YouGov. Their partners measure and maximize ROI and are telling compelling stories with data. Visit yougov.com/gaming-esports to learn more. Can I just segue here, guys, to maybe the least surprising gaming news of all time, which we're going to kick off sort of this live stream with? And this one's a bit of a doozy, but I don't think it is going to surprise anyone. And that is GTA 6 could release in 2024 or 2025. This is the rumor now. 11 or 12 year gap between GTA 5 and GTA 6. The article is basically quoting with Tom Henderson, video game industry insider, that Rockstar basically is not going to have this ready or even cares to have it ready maybe until as late as 2025. They talk about shortage of consoles right now also, that maybe that's not the ideal environment to sort of release this new game into. But what do you guys feel about, we've hit on this subject before on the podcast and on the live stream, I think. Will we look back? Let me frame the question this way. Will we look back at history? Will we be talking 5 years from now going, Take-Two and Rockstar really messed this up, right? That they should have had GTA 6 much earlier at the, while GTA 5 is still even sort of interesting, and they should have taken advantage. Does anyone think that, or you're okay with the wait?
I mean, the way you're phrasing the question, the premise is basically that GTA won't be popular in 2024, 2025.
I don't know.
History, I mean, at some point, maybe that will be the case, but it seems like this thing just defies gravity and is, if anything, more popular than ever before. I mean, if you look at Twitch, player counts, it's just a phenomenon. So we can get into the business model and everything and why it makes sense for them to keep milking it. We've probably talked about that many, many times, but it's just an insane phenomenon.
You don't get mad at Tropicana for not replacing orange juice every year. We are used to change in the industry, but if the core product is working, because the reality is, who is going to play GTA 6? Everybody who played GTA 5, right? So it is a replacement product. Let's be honest, right? Like, I find it very doubtful at this stage. Like, yeah, there'll be some new players that come in, but your overlap for GTA 6 versus GTA 5 has got to be massive. So it is a replacement product. If the GTA 5 game is incredibly popular, which it is, why would you feel the need to replace it? And more to the point, I'd also, flip it the other way and say, look, like GTA 5 at this point has just been such a success. Imagine how difficult it is to sequel, right? Isn't this nice for the games industry that you have a developer that's given time to really invest, to build, to plan, to put all this effort into making a sequel truly exceptional? And it's a rare moment where a financial success of a title has actually created an opportunity for prolonged creativity rather than just immediate pressure to like churn out the next version because we need it. I think this almost is an encouraging alternative model for how mega successful blockbuster games can be treated, right?
William, I'm kind of surprised you're saying this, because you were the guy that made, I thought, the most eloquent case for Cyberpunk taking too long, right? The technology changes, right? Like, you were the guy I felt that made a great argument that it took way too long and this was part of the problem.
Oh, yeah, I definitely
Are you not concerned here that GTA 6, if it takes this long, may become look,
there certainly is a technological risk, because at some point, if you're starting, at this point, 12 years, what platform did you start development on? It's just realistically, but you also, have to kind of, so there's questions about how you manage development cycles meaningfully that last that long, right? Like, what do you actually have teams doing in the early stages of a 12-year development cycle? It might not be coding because the engine will be different, but is it like there's real questions. There's real risks with very long-term projects for sure, right? And don't get me wrong, I think GTA 5 has been such an unusual success that it sort of stretches the norms here. Like, for pretty much any other sequeled game, right, this is too long of a period of time. But the underlying title has sustained so well. Like, it's the same situation as WoW. Why don't we have WoW 2? Because WoW 1 still does really well. In fact, WoW 1 does so well, the only thing we're willing to give you is the older version of WoW 1, right? Like, that's how popular it is. It's almost like you expect GTA 5 to learn it's GTA 5 Vanilla Edition, like, but, all joking aside, like, I think, there's real questions here, and this is a significant length of time. But again, I go back to the core insight, which is this is probably a replacement product. If the core item doesn't need replacing, isn't this a good business decision to let the chips ride? Like, yeah, I feel that pretty strongly.
So I don't disagree with you guys, but the comparison I try and draw in my mind is I look at Call of Duty or other franchises with significant following and success. Because if this were, an unheard of publisher and in their first massive success, yeah, you run into the problem where you need to have a strong follow, otherwise you might not last. But if you have this following, if you have 7-8 games under your belt and a fan base that's going to buy every single one of them, there comes a point where they're missing on an opportunity to pump out GTA 6 and then 7 in this same cycle, and whatever revenue that would bring and potential success. Again, notwithstanding GTA 5 being this massive, right? Like that's kind of the differentiator here, but that's just where I'm thinking.
The other thing I'll point out here is, by waiting so long, you do increase the risk profile, right? So think about Call of Duty, right? Like, if 1 year's Call of Duty isn't so good, what's your maximum risk on that? 1 year, right? Because then you have another Call of Duty coming, get to try again, it'll be great. But for this, and I don't, let's hope this isn't the world we live in, but imagine GTA 6 just isn't that good, right? The risk there is, it's pretty catastrophic, right? Because it's a replacement product. So you're not losing 1 or 2 years of sales. You're losing 12 years worth of sales. Now, granted, the publisher would probably rush to have an earlier sequel and all that stuff. But fundamentally, if you're willing to let franchises last for a longer period of time, you are potentially more profitable because you need to invest arguably in less development and less sequelization, but you're also riskier because you have less of an annualized cushion to fall back on. So it'll be really interesting. Again, I really hope for the industry, GTA 6 is a big success because it shows another way you can manage a AAA franchise. And I just think we should have more business models around like, not every AAA franchise needs to have a yearly release cycle. I firmly believe that. It works for some movies like Marvel, right? But there are other great classics for, film that you enjoy that might come out, once and then never again, or maybe get sequel 10 years later, and we're fine with that, So I like that auteur model is existing here.
So if I have a specific question for you, one second. I just want to read the comments. Slightly says, but even COD is adopting that consistency model in Warzone. True. And in some ways, they have the best of both worlds between Warzone and the yearly COD releases. He says, I think the new model will be more profitable, strategic to make sure they don't screw it up. Yeah, again, but the risks are higher, right? To that point, the longer that they take. Robert, I think good to see you here. Good to see you back here. Cam says, no rush. Cam, you say I'm in no rush. GTA 5 still has awesome online content. I hope it comes out when it's ready. It's just the expectations are going to be so high is the problem. Waiting this long. Jeff, my question for you specifically is, at what point does the market, like does the street, essentially get tired of waiting for GTA 6?
to some extent, never, right? They're buying themselves time every year around right around their fiscal year end. I mean, you always have some analysts that, don't really know the space well enough, and they're like, oh, GTA is coming next year. But most people who are invested in Take-Two understand that GTA is probably several years in the distance. And when I say they keep buying themselves time, what I mean is their other games are doing so well, plus GTA Online. I mean, I think the thing we have to remember, and this is probably stating the obvious, we've talked about it a lot, and Cam even mentioned it, it's not like GTA 5 is driving units right now because of the single player. And it's not like Rockstar finished GTA 5 and they were like, what we're going to do? Like, let's take 10 years off. Like, we're not working. We're just hanging out. They're pumping out content, for GTA Online that is keeping people super, super engaged and is making them boatloads of money. So I think that's the thing to recognize, when you think about the sequel, not only they're going to have to create a great single player game, because they will do that, right? That's what Rockstar does. They pretty much never miss in terms of that. So I don't think there should be a worry, hey, the single player game's not going to be great. The question, I think the massive challenge, and really I would say it's pretty much unprecedented, is building that user base. They probably have 20, 30 million people that are playing either daily or monthly, porting that over to a completely new experience when the old one has taken 10 years of content to build. It's like when Facebook makes a change to the news feed, everyone's like, oh, I want the old one, or maybe that was a terrible boomer example, but pretty much anytime you try to take someone from a product they love to a new product, you automatically, one, it costs money to reacquire those players, and then there's friction because people are like, well, I liked the old GTA Online, I liked the controls, I liked all the content that was in there. So you're kind of going to lose people. And then you create a scenario. Do you have to create content for both? Do you have to port new content to the old one? Do you port the old one to the new one? It's a really hard challenge when you're sitting here printing money. It's really easy to be like, well, let's wait a year. Like, what's our rush? Like, why do we, they got a good thing going.
It also raises a question I'd point out, which is like, what is a sequel, right? Like, we understand sequels to really in a pre-internet world. Like, sequels were like, I could only fit so much in a box. The sequel is the next box I'm sold, right? Whether that's a game cartridge or a VHS tape or whatever. If you put GTA 5 today up against launch GTA 5, I think you'd think it was a sequel, maybe multiple iterations of a sequel, right? Like, everything about the core game has been enhanced. I mean, sure, maybe the single player story, there's still some, but like functionally, the game has been sequeled because all this stuff has gone into it. And again, no one is clamoring for League of Legends to release League of Legends 2 because we recognize that the business model for that is consistent incremental upgrades. Again, I think it's a different business model. And it does raise an interesting question of like, I almost wonder if Rockstar would launch a GTA 6 by just saying GTA 5 is now GTA 6.
Well,
like,
I mean,
quite
this is
seriously. Like,
if they could charge
William.
you
This
for
is Robert's question here. But Wade says Tron 2.0. But Robert asks, I think, the same question you're asking, William, which is, when do we get to a point that the games no longer have an incremental update, but just sustain a title and build additional content to it? In other words, everything becomes WoW.
There are I mean, Destiny is going towards that model, right? I mean, Warframe has that. But there are plenty of. Someone mentioned Warzone, and I know what you asked, William, so I'll let you jump in. But like, Warzone's basically trying to do that for Call of Duty, like be this storyline that cuts through all the franchises.
Yeah, like, I mean, the best possible case scenario is you stop having to reacquire customers, right? So I think, like, in a perfect world, like, and this is why I think esports are so interesting and stand out so much, is most of them have this business model where you're stuck. Like, once you're in League of Legends, you're not really looking to leave League. You might have periods where you're spending more time with the game and periods where you're spending less, but you're kind of in League and in that ecosystem. And it's incredibly de-risking for publishers. It's incredibly lucrative, right? But it also arguably is sort of a better and more interesting content model from just an abstract business perspective. The downside too, though, is we think this model looks fresh today and appealing because it's so very rarely achieved. Like, you can count the number of games that have a true, like, persistent content model, like, probably on two hands, maybe even one hand, right? Like very few games do this well enough to actually sustain and grow over time. And I think as more games get to that state, I wonder if you'd like what the world looks like, because every year it would just be, okay, what's the big game? What's E3 this year? The new Warzone patch, the new GTA patch, the new League patch. Like, it's not, you do want a mixture of creativity and sparks and new properties. So not everything should get on this business model, but I do think when you have a titanic success, you should look at it very closely, because it's a very appealing world to go on. And if I can say one more thing, in some sense, I think Activision Blizzard has been the smartest maybe of all with this hybridized model, because now they get to double dip. They get Warzone, which is the backbone that has your consistent content, but they haven't had to walk away from the old annual box model. And I think that's going to give them some of the protectiveness you get with an annualized title, with some of the flexibility of having a consistent player base to market to. So I don't know, just my 2 cents.
Yeah, Gabriel here says, I think they're in a loss at this point and the time. Gabriel, I'm curious why you think that. I would love if you could expand on that, because I'm curious. Robert says,
feels like more of a win-win to me. I would be curious to hear the argument.
Yeah.
Loss.
Robert says, why even make a sequel? Just seasonalize content and make graphics refresh. This is a pending shift in game release cycles. Plus, do you not run the risk of alienating gamers who don't know should they play SF5 or SF6? I mean,
yeah.
My view on this, guys, I think is just, I think you lose something when you take out the true sequels. And I'll give you an example, like with WoW specifically. At some point in WoW, and again, this is only anecdotal, but I think it happens to everybody. After Wrath of the Lich King, right? It's like you get tired of WoW and you stop playing it, right? And there's a lot of people who got fatigued with WoW at that point in time and stopped playing it. To get that customer back is not obvious, right? Like doing without sequels, without a new standalone game. Like to get a player back who leaves in this sort of seasonal kind of content, I think is just as hard as getting a brand new customer, is my sense.
Well, because what you're missing there is, I mean, you're missing a bunch of things, but you're missing, the tent pole, right? Like you're missing
the new
marketing. Yeah,
William,
you're missing
right?
the marketing message that can pull you back, which is really significant. But you're also missing, what you're saying is incremental content doesn't do it for you, because at the point where you've lost interest in a game, a new mount and a new series of quests isn't enough to roll you back in. You actually need something to be a little more fundamentally different. And sequels are great because they let you make fundamental changes. And yeah, it's a tricky question. I think sort of what you're also saying there is, are there game mechanics that are so good they can last for forever, right? Like I think, like, because the perfect game you don't lose interest in, so we never have your problem. Now,
that game doesn't exist.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
no one has made that game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I know, but from a theoretical perspective, right? Like, so it's interesting. I'm interested to see at some point these mega games are going to have to sequel. I think for the reason you're describing, Paul, right? Like, and I think like maybe WoW is coming to this point in their life, for example, where like they're probably gonna, like I don't know what their user numbers are, but it's just been around for so long, and now with bifurcating the player base between WoW and WoW Classic, like at some point they're going to need something to bring everybody back together again, right? The question is, how do these brands handle that? Because I don't think you can really point to anything that has happened previously in the market where a major Titan decade-spanning brand has sequeled itself. I don't think we have I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think there's been an event like that in games. Right? Right?
You're right. You're absolutely right. I think the second part of it for me also is just, if I'm and as someone working in the industry, I'm concerned about its future, obviously, right? I want to make sure the industry succeeds. This sort of seasonal content and incremental refreshes, and William, you alluded to this, you're working within the box still of the original game, right? Like you're still within a framework that limits you. And so what you can do from an innovation standpoint, like you said it yourself, another mount and maybe a new raid, but that's about it, right? There's nothing fundamentally different between WoW 10 years ago and WoW today, right? It plays pretty much the same, and yeah, there's more content, but and Fortnite's, I would argue, is the same, and Destiny's the same, and Warzone's the same, and right? It's all incremental, but incremental isn't innovative by definition.
Yeah, you know, and this is where, again, I mean, you know, I don't want to say some of the, but like all these persistent things in games, I don't want to say they dampen innovation, because I think there's tons of innovation coming out from all of them. And I think in some sense, these persistent games are the best and most innovative because they have such talented people working on them. The things they're doing within the constraints of it has to fit in this box, you know, are really incredible. But like, yeah, it's really, because like the thing is, nobody is saying sports need, like nobody's asking where's baseball 2.0, right? Like, oh, we're gonna get really bored of, well, maybe they should do baseball too, but like I struggle so much with like, do we, you know, I always go back to like, well, do we really need it? But something about me fundamentally says I think we do, because I think our medium has so much entertainment baked into it. And entertainment, you do need, like, because the medium of gaming is broader than just sports, because it also encompasses entertainment and interactivity and all of these things, it's actually stronger than sports. But that has a unique challenge, which you do need these phase changes. And yeah, we're coming up to phase changes in our industry. Like, some of these things are due for a phase change. And that's, I think, really scary, because like, how do you migrate? Like, how do you migrate a customer base to WoW 2? Seriously, how do you do that? It's a very difficult problem.
It's uncharted territory, really.
And it's terrifying, because your most loyal customers have been playing WoW for so long. How can they possibly like WoW 2? WoW must be the perfect game for them. If you played WoW for 20 years, you've stuck it out the whole time. That's your perfect game. What can WoW 2 offer you? This other game was good enough to keep you around for 20 years. You know, so like it's non-trivial problems navigating success is this massive.
Jimmy, you have the last word on this before I move on here.
No, I don't want to, just because I was going to introduce two other games that I thought would have been interesting comparisons, and it would take the full hour to analyze.
No,
you know, I could leave it for the audience, I don't know if these are directly on par, but I wanted to introduce Assassin's Creed, which introduced a new fighting engine around the Egyptian version, and then Odyssey. And then I also wanted to introduce Bethesda with Elder Scrolls Online, as well as Fallout 76. But we'll just leave that for your the audience's imagination.
I just want to catch up on comments here. Gabriel says they can't make everyone happy. How many will go over to 6 and stay on 5? That's, I think, the challenge, Gabriel, that we're alluding to here, that it's not obvious that everyone will just move over. That's not instant.
Yeah, and like, if I can just, sorry, I've talked a lot, but like, look at Smash Brothers Ultimate. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it literally has every character in every Smash Brothers game ever, right? They didn't miss a single one, right? Am I right about that? They got every single character to come over. I think every single stage. I think they have like pretty much every single, like literally they took the approach of Ultimate, all the content plus new content. And there are still people like, nah, the N64 version, that's the, you know, like, it's really hard.
Slightly says Fortnite basically released its sequel with Chapter 2, but brought everything over. Yeah, this is live service. This is not sequel, right? Not in the sense of, you know, a new box. Cam says, like the Destiny fatigue, new content, but it's the same engine world. Yeah, and I think these live services, this fatigue is going to become a real thing. I think we're starting to see it. Cam says, think sports games would ever go live service or continue cashing in every year? Sports games, I mean,
every year.
If anything, sports games make maybe more sense, no? As a live service?
Well, you've answered your own question, Cam. I mean, I think with sports games, one, I think they'd be really good as subscriptions, actually, because there are, you know, I think there was a stat EA would always give, like 70% of people basically who buy FIFA each year bought it the previous year. So it's all, you know, that's a pretty decent subscription retention rate, if you think about it that way. Reason why they wouldn't do it as live service is because of the Ultimate Team model. All of these, they make so much money selling you these card packs and these players, and every year they want to be able to refresh your progress. It's a lot harder to make the argument of where did all my players go, you know, if it's a live service. But when you buy a new game, people kind of understand, hey, I'm starting fresh. Otherwise, it just kind of doesn't work.
And that's why, just more broadly, right? Like some of these things are useful for psychological consumer benchmarks, right? Like consumers understand certain products to behave a certain way.
Mhm.
And yeah, this is like live services. There's an expectation of continuity. So, it's like a really thorny puzzle. I don't know, guys. Like, and I think the more you unpack it, sorry, we should start talking about this. You know what? It's just like, I could go on about this. It's gonna be like 3 hours. I could point out tons more things for us.
You could write a whole book on this. I mean, this is
like maybe like no. This is like a really fundamental question, though. I agree with you. Actually, like it's like there's a lot to unpack here.
Slightly says the model only works if the developers can actually support the game. Hashtag save Apex Ranked. As someone who used to play a lot of Apex Ranked, like even there, supporting the game, new content, like you still get fatigue, even if the game's going well and making new content. If it's not, you definitely get fatigue. But I think it's unavoidable, basically. Chris says, as GTA gets more detail in their respected cities, each new iteration will have a longer lifespan because there's so much to explore. I'm tired of playing in LA. Bring on Liberty City in the 70s. Yeah, I mean, this is one reason why it has had this, 5 has had such a long lifespan. That means the next game could go like 20 years. That's the case. Gabriel says, WoW is so much older than me.
How old is WoW? Did I get it right? It's like 20 years. Like, how old is WoW? It's
a little bit less than that, right? Yeah, I think 2004.
I don't know. Yeah, it sounds right.
November 23rd, 2004.
Yeah.
I remember buying my boxed copy, by the way. Like, because back then, for an online service game, you still had to get a boxed copy. Like,
Cam says $80 reset plus roster updates. That's exactly what it is. They another way to cash in.